It's time for Anarchy in the Arena, otherwise known as Assholes in the Asylum. Twinkle Toes, the Buckaroos, and Hangnail Page against Plumber Moxley, Claudio, Wheeler Useless, and poor Bryan Danielson. Once the greatest wrestler in the world, now forced to hold the chicken while the geek bites its head off in the county fair. And there's nothing worse than being a geek except being the fucking holder for the geek. Can you imagine how low that is to have to hold the chicken while the other guy has the high-paying job of biting its head off? Anyway, so the BBC had a band. I wonder what the music budget is on it. What about ASCAP and BMI? Are they all in on this?
I would assume whatever the publishing company is for Wild Thing, they're in on this.
Are they getting the memo on this? Hopefully this is not a fucking bootleg type of operation, but they had some kind of band play Wild Thing for the BBC, and the lead singer of the band was in blackface.
Now, this is after Max Caster brought up blackface.
Yes.
Earlier in the show. And this guy's looking right at the camera.
The only difference between this guy and Al Jolson was that this guy's lipstick was red rather than white. But otherwise, what was the meaning of this? And how did this escape anybody's attention that there's a fucking white guy out there in blackface? And everybody's just wandering around like it's goddamn normal. And like nobody's saying a goddamn thing about it any place else on anywhere else in this country. At any time of day or night. In any state, in any city, in any county, in any province. If somebody shows up in blackface, it makes the network news. This guy's out there in fucking blackface and everybody's just, they're singing along to the song.
Hey, Tony wants to know where the band is. Oh, we're ready, but Jerry's putting on his blackface.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't go out there tonight, guys.
Was this a band that is heard of, or is this just friends of Moxley's?
That's actually the name of the band, Blackface.
You know, there used to be a Southern band called Blackfoot.
I do know that.
But unfortunately, that was also a Southern condition many people would have lived around the periphery of the swamp. So, but no, have these people ever been heard of by anybody, or are these friends of Moxley's? Because I would believe anything.
I don't know who the band is, to be honest with you, but everyone that I've talked to so far, including you now, has had the same reaction. As soon as this guy was shown on camera, it was, oh my God, he's in blackface.
And it wasn't like that there was a whole motif to their stage presentation that would somehow give context or make clear why this motherfucker's out there in fucking blackface. It wasn't like they weren't the Amos and Andy fucking trio or what. So anyway.
Max Sennett presents Wild Thing.
The fight started in the stands because the Elite went up to meet, because they couldn't come out. That's nothing. They got the band on the stage playing their entrance, but they couldn't come by and high-five their band because they had to come from the fucking top of the cheap seats. So they get in a fight all up in the stands, all 8 guys, and you can't see anything, and the cameras are trying to cut back and forth, and the band is still playing. And there's bad indie wrestling, quotation marks, everywhere going on. It's just the wet dream of any outlaw indie mud show wrestler to be on TV and do this shit that they all do. And then there's Claudio, poor Claudio, he has such talent. God damn it. And he's holding the corpse referee, that fucking Rick Knox, that desiccated fucking liver-looking piece of motherfucker. And he's done a blade job. It was only a pap smear, but still, the referee is bleeding. And I guarantee you, because he's a Mark, friend of the Buckaroos from, I guess he was the principal when they were in grade school, because he's got to be 60, right? But I guarantee you he went up to them and said, hey, can I bleed tonight too? It's going to be badass.
You remember it was months ago that we were talking about the fact that AEW, to their benefit, to their credit, didn't have ref bumps? And tonight, on this show, we saw a ref bleed. We saw another ref take a guitar shot.
Mark Briscoe was bumped, a special referee.
I don't know what Sabu was, but he left.
But anyway, yes. So now the Mark referee is bleeding to fulfill some kind of fetish he's got about being in the wrestling business for real and bleeding and everything. So then Hangnail took his eye patch off that they've been milking. His eye is fine. It was a fucking rib all along. It was a way to sucker him in, think he was half blind, but they didn't use it in any way. He just got in the ring and took the patch off. Okay, I'm fine. And then they had an 8-way in the ring with chairs, and they were doing all of this violent stuff while at the same time somehow with their body language or their actual actions or whatever showing that they were not really serious about it and it was all fake at the same time. How do they do that?
I don't know.
But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh no, I watched this match. I watched this disaster of a match with the music playing all throughout the early portion of it. I watched this.
Well, and then the Buckaroos, to their credit, finally stopped the band by super kicking the singer.
I will say, though, one of the highlights of the match for me, because they do Wild Thing once, and you're like, okay, they're going to do it while the fight happens. Then they go into it the second time, and it's still going, and I don't remember Wild Thing being that long. But then there's a little bit of a pause, and then they go into it for the third time, and you almost hear the crowd react like, oh, like they were even happy that this is going to continue because it's so ridiculous now.
And again, I think at one point the band just said, fuck it, starting over. We're just going to Wild Thing. You make my heart say Wild Thing. You make my heart say Wild Thing. They're like record skipping. But then the singer got super kicked, and that brought that to an end. And then we noticed the plumber was bleeding. Plumber Moxley's bleeding. I don't know which that I'm more confused about at this point. Why would anyone want to watch this match, or why would anyone want to do it? Even if they were going to do a garbage match main event, they didn't protect it. Every other match tonight was the same thing. No rules, do whatever. So I was always taught, whatever you're doing, that's disrespectful to the main event if you do what the main event's going to do. In this case, it's everything, but they didn't even protect their own garbage wrestling. They let everybody else step on the main event guys, even if this is something that deserves to be stepped on, like a cockroach. And that, again, why? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Is this the fantasy now that guys have? And we used to like to pretend to be big star wrestlers. But we didn't pretend to want to be big star wrestlers and fucking dive off ladders and put people through furniture and roll around in barbed wire. And it'd be cool if we stomped on thumbtacks. It's fucking stupid. How old are they? Fucking 8? When you're 15 years old, you want to work and be like Stone Cold Steve Austin or whoever the top guy was in your territory. And why ever have another show? Ever another wrestling show? What else is left to do? Claudio and little Maddie were out in the concession stand. Twinkle Toes and the plumber were taking bumps on a barbed wire wrapped poker chip that was 3 feet wide. Moxley stabbed Twinkle Toes time after time in the head with a fork, but there was no blood, Jerry. There was no blood. Not from Twinkle Toes. Just from Moxley, who bleeds when people fucking think bad thoughts about him. Tony Schiavone had a brilliant quote. It's hard to follow what's going on, you think? 15 minutes felt like an hour. Paige was bleeding. Nikki was bleeding. Claudio and Maddie were in a parking lot in the bed of a pickup truck. Moxley was licking Nikki's blood because that's badass. Somebody brought a leaf blower into the ring. but to hit people with, not even to blow in their face. I get because Moxley's a plumber, not a gardener. Then they got in the ring and did one thing after another. And then nothing happened. And then suddenly Maddie, who had been out in the pickup truck in the parking lot, comes back down to ringside. And they've gimmicked his boot. So he super kicks Moxley and his boot explodes in pyro. An exploding super kick. How would that have happened in any respect? He was just in the bed of a pickup truck in the parking lot. He stopped on the way back before he could help his friends in this desperate struggle to load his boot with nitroglycerin. What the
gunpowder.
Children that they, oh, well, this would be so cool. Wouldn't that be cool? Yes, it'd also be impossible to really happen in any way. What the fuck are you people doing?
When he gave the other two super kicks right away afterwards, was the pyro supposed to go off for those two, or was it a one-time thing? Because he just kept super kicking right after he did that first one.
Well, I think it was super kicking with the other foot, because I think it was just a one-shot boot. But see, here's the thing. The fucking BBC didn't know that. They didn't know whether or not that his right boot was still loaded, so they took him down and took his boot off and his sock off and dropped him foot first into thumbtacks. And this stupid little fucking weasel legitimately had thumbtacks stuck in his foot, his bare foot, because he's an idiot. How were these people raised? Who convinced them as children that this was wrestling and what they were supposed to imitate if they wanted to be wrestlers? How did their parents fail them? That they both wanted to do this as kids and never grew out of it. It's more classy now to aspire to be a trailer park meth maker than a pro wrestler. So then they put tacks in Matt's mouth and Claudio hit him with an uppercut. And I wrote in letters that looks like they were clipped out of a ransom note, "Will not end." And finally, Twinkle Toes was about to give Useless the one-winged fairy when Don Fallis rolled into the ring. And Kenny turned, and of course, instead of the aha moment where he turns around and points at him and has fire in his eyes, and the heel begs off, and Kenny just turned around and stood there like a fucking mooch. Ah, you. And then, did you see the incredible choreography? I had to play it back 4 or 5 times, this part. This is why it took me so long to watch this show. I got up early to get through the whole thing, but I had to run so many things back because I couldn't believe them. The choreography between Don Fallis and our friend Take a Shit. Did you catch it, or were you rolling your eyes by that point?
I mean, I knew what was happening as it was happening, but what are you talking about?
I'm talking about... So Don Fallis is standing there in the ring, and Kenny Olivier is looking at him, and the shit's about to go down. And what's supposed to happen, and I encourage everybody, go back and watch this if you don't believe me, on your DVRs or wherever you keep this pornography, in a closet locked up, hopefully away from the children. Take a Shit is supposed to roll in the ring from the floor and come from behind Don Fallis and hit Kenny with the big running, jumping knee and knock him goofy, right? Well, goddamn, as Don is begging back a little bit from Kenny, he looks over his right shoulder to see if Take is coming. And Take is coming. He's coming under the rope at that point. So instead of moving to his left and letting Take a Shit stand up and run and give Kenny this knee, Don moves to his right and gets right in front of Take a Shit, where Take a Shit bumps Don coming up, and Don stumbles and falls down and nearly trips Take a Shit to where Take a Shit at the last minute saves this thing partially by jumping over Don Callis and hitting Kenny kind of sort of in the upper chest with his fucking knee, and Kenny takes a big-ass bump. Don tripped him. He tripped his own man. He tripped his own man, Jerry. He got in the way and got bumped and then went down and fucking nearly flummoxed it. It would have been, if Take a Shit had fallen on his face at Kenny's feet, that would have been the funniest thing I've ever seen. As it was, he connected somewhat. Kenny took a big bump. The referee was staring at everything because it's no disqualification. And then Wheeler Useless comes in with a screwdriver and stabs Kenny in the head. No blood there. And pinned him 1, 2, 3 in 30 minutes of this. I couldn't delete it fast enough. The WWE needs to watch out. And I'm going to go on record as saying that right now. The WWE needs to watch out if AEW presents any more shows like this. Then the WWE is in trouble. Because you watch another one of these son of a bitches, you don't want to see any wrestling at all, ever. Your thoughts?
I thought this was awful. The camera work made it even better. Whenever they flashed from one fight scene to another in a different part of the arena, it became funnier and funnier to me. The music doesn't make it more badass. It makes it funny. It's funny. When they go into the second time, it's funny. People laughed when they went into the third time. I think when you look at the problems in AEW, and we've got a lot of feedback. A lot of people thought we were too nice in everything we've said about the success so far with Wembley. I was very shocked by the feedback. People thought we should have pointed out that WWF did however many thousand at Wembley when business was dead domestically. That WCW did great in Europe in the early 90s when they couldn't do anything domestically. So it's
that's nothing unusual. That's been the case for the past 35 years since Vince started the national or international expansion. They book more international stuff when business is down domestically because they haven't burnt the international markets out. They get very sparing amounts of shows so they can always be depended on, and there's a built up and pent up demand where that does not exist in the United States, where they've been over wrestled, especially this kind of wrestling. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I think when you look at the problems they're having with ticket sales, the problems they're having with not growing their audience, the problems they're now having with dead audiences. Remember the spirit and the energy around AEW 4 years ago and 3 years ago. Then the pandemic, people were excited to get AEW back. The TV's been bad. The booking's been really, really bad. There are more and more stories coming out about different wrestlers basically doing whatever program they want to do as long as Tony says okay. So we talk about they're needing booking help. At this point, they just need one person to be the booker. Just one. Not a committee, and then wrestlers get to do what they want anyway.
Well, yeah, even the TV matches, it looks like they just send them out there and say, okay, go out and have a match. You win. Got 10 minutes, and just figure it out.
But when you look at all the problems they're having right now and how dead everything feels, nothing has any spirit or energy. I don't care how happy Tony wants to appear in the media scrum and how great everything they want to say everything is here. When you look at the ticket sales and everything else, how do you not blame? I shouldn't even say blame, because again, there's a booker and there's an owner. But the Elite and the Blackpool Combat Club, this has been bad. This has been poorly booked. No one's as into it as the wrestlers that are in it.
That's a perfect statement.
And it's true. And I think AEW really better. They're in a dangerous point right now because I know they have great things happening. They're getting another 2 hours of TV that they're going to be paid for. They're going to go to Wembley and do $8 million at least and a big crowd that'll look great. But things don't appear like anything is going upwards. There's no upwards mobility domestically right now. Nothing feels hot. There's no one you really yearn to see or go out of your way to see. The people that you felt that way about, they find a way to beat that off you.
Or they hide them until you just lose interest.
now we're going to have another show with a split roster. I have not seen anything that tells me these problems are not going to keep happening. We've been talking about it since the beginning, and people thought we were just haters. And then eventually everyone comes along and sees the way we saw it before they wanted to admit it. And I think you have a big problem in AEW right now. And it's a leadership problem, but it's a motivation. It's a fan motivation. But those fans sat there. There's a Vegas crowd. They sat there like it was New Japan. Like years ago, before there were like lots of spots to pop for.
No, they sat there like, are they kidding us? Seriously, because they just ran off and left them at the start, and there wasn't a way to... Every once in a while, like I said, they had a cool visual or something, but again, people popped more on spots than they did on people, on talent, on wanting somebody to win or to accomplish something. It's just, it's watching a loop of car wrecks, random car wrecks with people you don't know, in cars you've never owned.
Does anyone want to see any of these people again? The whole show, like, no one comes out of this like, oh, I can't wait to see what they're going to do next. I mean, maybe Statlander? Very few people on this show. And, with this main event, Takeshita turns, as we expected. I heard Danielson during the media scrum, and this is part of the problem. And this is part of the being in the bubble and not being in reality and wanting something more than it should happen. But they were really putting over the idea they gave Wheeler Yuta the win in this match with all these different people that are AEW top stars.
Wait a minute, they said at the media scrum, yeah, we let Wheeler win?
Well, that's not the way they said it, but Danielson is taking a lot of pride in the fact that Wheeler Yuta got an opportunity to get that win in that match, where more than likely he shouldn't have been the one. And there's nothing other than the fact that Moxley and Danielson want this guy around them. There's nothing that says he's ready for the next level, the next step. Fans aren't yelling for him. His work isn't spectacular, but they gave him the win in this match. They elevate the wrong people. They push the wrong people. They let the wrong people have input into their fucking stuff. Just everything there right now is not good.
That's a great way to get out of it.
All right. Well, that was AEW Double or Nothing. And at this point, we return to whatever else is on this drive-thru. Tally ho.